The storm that struck the Great Lakes in early November of 1975 started out in classic fashion for storms that tend to wallop our corner of the world. On November 8th, low pressure tracked out of the Rockies and across the Oklahoma Panhandle before making that classic left-hand hook up toward the Great Lakes. And as the Edmund Fitzgerald departed Superior on the afternoon of November 9th, conditions were actually pretty quiet. Modest northeasterly winds around 15 miles per hour and a swell, if you could even call it that, of about 1 to 2 feet. But before long, the approaching and strengthening storm would start to make its presence known. By 1 in the morning on the 10th, winds around the Fitzgerald as it worked out into Lake Superior had picked up to 35 to 40 miles per hour. Waves likely up around 10 feet at this point. Harsh conditions, but still nothing for a ship her size. And this was especially true since she was heading straight into those winds and the waves. It allowed her to really effectively cut through those swells. Keep that little bit in mind. Now, as she started to turn across the northern end of the lake, winds remained strong, seas still up at about 10 feet at mid-morning. Now, late in the morning on the 10th, the Fitzgerald would pass near the center of the area of low pressure. Now, this actually provided a brief break from the gales and from the high seas as the wind field shifted around. But now, the storm itself was actually exploding in intensity as it lifted off to the north and toward the Hudson Bay. So just a few hours later, winds had swung around to the northwest and they had picked back up to gale force, 25 to 45 miles per hour where the Fitzgerald was sailing. And even bigger problems were developing ahead of her because as the winds shifted to the northwest, it was pushing the biggest waves and focusing them down in the southeast corner of Lake Superior. This big open fetch of water here allowed the waves to build up energy and momentum over hundreds of miles. So by the time the Fitzgerald was getting down into that corner of the lake, well, it was dealing with winds that could have been reaching over 80 miles per hour at times and constant waves that were getting up over 20 feet high. And these waves were also now broadsiding her as they moved from west to east. That's a much more dangerous situation than meeting them head on. And it's thought that the Edmund Fitzgerald succumbed to these conditions at around 7:15 in the evening on the 10th. Now, the storm itself, certainly a powerful one, was not particularly rare in its intensity. Winds and waves like the ones that the Fitzgerald experienced have theoretical return periods of just a few years, but a couple things were extremely rare. First was the west to east direction of those waves. Climatologically, almost all waves of this height actually occur in more of a north-south fashion. So it's likely a part of the reason why at one point Captain McSorley radioed that he'd never seen such seas. Second, the fact that the ship happened to even encounter this terrible combination at the worst possible time is also extremely unlikely and frankly unlucky. Relatively speaking, these lakes are huge and the area of them covered at any given point by shipping traffic is minuscule, and that the Fitzgerald happened into this combination of conditions was incredibly unfortunate and ultimately incredibly tragic. Meteorologist Phil DeCastro, Fox 11 News.